Relax, the keyboard is off, the press box is closed, and the mic is just getting warmed up as the guardian of the blue paint turned writer is about to enlighten us. The show where the writer is fresh off the presses and the ink is not dry. For this week's show, the good, the bad, the ugly, a Flyers end of the season review. Welcome to the Hockey Writers Ink. Join Lance and Steel as we bring you all the latest on the Flyers.
Hi guys, welcome back to another edition of the Hockey Writers Ink. As always, I'm your host, Lance Green.
And as always, Flying Shotgun is your co-host, SteelFlyers. And Lance, my friend, my man, we got the main man, Pots and Pants from the O&BPuck. Oh, how you doing, my friend?
Doing all right. Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh. We got Isaiah from O&BPuck sitting in with us because we had to bring in a special guest for this final show of the season, for this season anyway, for the 2023. We still got, Hockey Writers Ink is always going to keep on flying, but we had to bring Isiash from O&BPuck in because I got to tell you, this guy always, he's the one of the founding guys of O&BPuck. He always has his finger on the pulse of what's going on with this team. He always brings in the best guys. Yeah, buddy. He always brings in the best guys that are sitting in with the team, that have the insights of the team. Do you know what I'm saying? So this is the kind of the guys that Isaiah brings in with his O&BPuck and Chef and Dan and all the guys over there at O&BPuck. And, Isaiah, you've been friends of our show since day one. And we had to bring you on, man, because, for one, it's been a while. We needed to catch up with you, and we wanted to get your take on the season that's been so far this year for the Flyers. So we're going to get right into it. What do you think?
Well, it's been a tough year. Someone brought up a comment I made on Twitter when I was running the account today at O&BPuckcast on Twitter at O&BPuck.
Which you guys got to go follow.
Yeah. We appreciate it, definitely. And I talked about it was a miserable season, but, it's over. And at least Chuck and Dave, who are really the main drivers of misery over the last several years, are gone. And that's a good thing. And then someone, in a very calm fashion, measured fashion, said, well, why do you think it was miserable? They're more competitive, blah, blah, blah. And it's still only a 73-point season. If they win tonight, it's tops 75, right? Last year was 61. This isn't up to the standard of the Philadelphia Flyers for 50 years. No, it's a minus 56 goal differential. Okay, it should have started a year ago for this rebuild. Yes. And just think about the assets they lost in the Tony D'Angelo trade. Now, he's a guy they're probably going to have to buy out, and we'll probably get into that. And also the assets they passed up in a year where Ben Sherratt fetched a first-round draft pick. You'd think Rasmus Ristolainen couldn't have done at least just a second, probably a first-rounder. So just thinking about how far along they could have been, and maybe even in a better spot, maybe finishing with 61 points again this year, where would that put them in the lottery and the hierarchy? And how would that have affected their choice of coach? Okay, maybe they might not have hired. I get that there are positives to the way they did things. But if they miss out on a high-end talent here, then it's just going to take that much longer because there's still no 1D, there's still no one's, first-line center. And we really, there's no stars. So, yeah, it's still a miserable year, and they're behind the 8 ball.
It's like, all right, thanks for the promo, bro.
Yeah, the same stuff we've been talking about for quite some time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude, it's sick. Look, so let's get into it here, folks. We are episode 119 from the Hockey Writers Ink. The good, the bad, the ugly. The Flyers end of the season review featuring Isiash from O&BPuck. Episode 119, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The season preview, and so. The first thing I want to talk about, obviously, is the good. there has been some good. We all have reported, we have all expressed our views and our opinions over the last 3 seasons of what we thought about what's going on with this team, about how we felt about management, about how we felt about ownership, about how we felt about coaching, about medical, about team, about development, about prospects, about getting prospects, signing free agents, the whole 9 yards. Over the last 3 years, we've talked about all those things, right? Here we are right now today, right? Isaiah, you pointed it out. The team at best will be 75 points. Okay. This is what now? 3rd year in a row now missing the playoffs, right? I can remember when the Flyers went 28 out of 29 seasons making the playoffs. Okay. So there has been some good. And Lance, your article that you wrote specifically that is tied directly to this, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the season preview of the Flyers. There has been some good. Isaiah, what has been your good of this season? I mean, you already kind of mentioned some things, but give me what your good is for this season.
Well, number one, you have to live in Realville. So that's the recognition of where they're at.
Yeah.
Everything begins there, because then from there you can formulate a plan, have a mission statement, and know how to proceed and fill in different spots of the organization in accordance with that. Whether it's I'm going to talk about how they're screwing up the whole thing with the president of Hockey Ops and how they put the cart before the horse in that regard. There's some more dysfunction to be left over, but still there is a recognition of where they're at. So it begins there. Because if you're, in the aggressive retool nonsense, and if you have your coach in Tortorella driving the narrative all year about how this essentially has to be built from the bottom up, and then like in December you had Fletcher coming out talking about, well, with only 5 or 6 points out of the playoffs, and it's just total disconnect. It's okay. That's gone. And that is number one. And then, of course, number two would be the development and the driving of excellence or toward improvement. I don't want to use the word excellence. I don't see it,
No, yeah, boy. Woo.
Yeah. The driving of positive results in both here in Lehigh Valley with some of these players they've drafted. Finally, some of these guys are actually carrying the water. It's not like Cal O'Reilly and not to say like guys like that and Nisimov haven't been important in Lehigh Valley, but it's good that Forster and now, Andre and Ronnie Addard and Bobby Brink, he's back. And those guys and Zamula, they're starting to drive the bus. And of course, Samuel Arson is someone that has some people thinking that he could be a contender for a starting job somewhere next year. You just don't know. That's good. And at the NHL level, of course, Owen Tippett's the first guy out of everybody's mouth because he really looks like he's fulfilling the potential that the promise he had when he was drafted in the first round by Florida. What was that, back in 2017, the same year as Morgan Frost? Morgan Frost has woken up and now looks like a bankable 40 to 50 point player in the league. And a lot of it has to do with less about points as much as making little plays in the corners, body position, stick on puck plays. They just couldn't even conceive at the beginning of the year that now he's making things like this. And this is important. Cam York looked like an NHL defenseman who's developing. So there's positive developments with these players. And of course, Noah Cates is a gem. I think he was drafted in the 5th round.
Yes.
And he really does look like, I guess, a poor man's Sean Couturier. And maybe right now he's as good as Sean was when he started out and was producing 30-point seasons. So these are positive developments by all means.
Okay. Lance, you are the mastermind behind one of the best articles that I think that's come out of you in a really long time. Not that your articles aren't good, but what I'm trying to say, though, is that this was so precise. This was so on target, and it was so perfectly worded that I'm not kidding. This is, I think, is one of your best ones. Give me your good and the inspiration for this article.
Yeah, I mean, just the inspiration for this article, guys, was a season end review, looking at, any positives I could look at, looking at the bad, which, like Isaiah said, the harsh reality of everything going
reality
on.
bill. I like that.
With the Flyers right now. Yeah. And then the ugly, the rearing stuff that is going to leave a hard pressed movement and restrict so many things for Danny Briere now trying to take over, at least in the interim, and trying to make some positive moves out of this. So like you were saying, the good. Obviously, like Isaiah said earlier, and like I said in my article, the first step was getting rid of Chuck Fletcher. They did that. And then I think, Dave retiring, graciously giving that option, I think, to bow out gracefully and get the heck out of town was needed as well. Those two had been a cancer for this team for a long time and just didn't really know what they were fully doing. So that was great. Some of the good aspects, obviously, I wrote about Owen Tippett. He's only 24 years old. And, he in Florida, he was really undervalued, buried in the depth chart there. And, Chuck Fletcher was able to squeak him into the part of the deal. I didn't even think Florida really knew that he would progress like this because they gave him a couple of games here and there, but never really let him settle into the NHL and develop on any set line with any set players there. They were always moving him about. So, you can't knock what he's been able to do this year. He's set new career highs and goals with 29, assists with 24, and total points scored with 47. He's exactly what the Flyers needed. They needed a shoot first guy, and they got it. Owen came in, and he's led the team this year to date. Right now, we're filming right before the last game. It's actually the last game against the Blackhawks is starting as we speak. But to date, he has 229 shots, a team leading 229 shots. All right, and he has 8 power play goals, leading the team in that as well. So a lot of positives there. Still young guy, still developing. He was able to score 29 goals with the crap that was put around him, to put it nicely.
That's a good way to put
If you
that.
could get some quality younger players coming in with the Cutter Gauthiers and, the Tyson Forresters and all these guys that are developing to play with him, who knows what his ceiling is. Okay. So that's a great person there to look forward to next year. And I believe Travis Konechny is. Under Tortorella, he seemed to regain himself in that offensive prowess that he once had when he was back-to-back 24-goal years, okay? He finished this year as the Flyers' top scorer with 29 goals to date when I wrote this article. And he did so only playing in 56 games of this season. A lot of other guys had a lot more games.
Yeah.
He got a bit banged up there, but he's 26. He signed for 2 more years at only $5.5 million. I don't think, obviously, with all the bad contracts, and we'll get into that in a bit, that you're going to have the cap space to go out and get a cornerstone piece. So I think he is that cornerstone piece of that franchise until somebody can take it away from him right now. Torts is looking at and forced him to be that leader offensively that John thought he could be, right? And, he wasn't playing up to par, he pushed him. He pushed him to be that player and produce. And he did when he was in the lineup. So That is another great spot or person that I really liked this season. Scott Lawton. Scott Lawton is a guy who Tortorella looked to as one of the only guys as a leader in the locker room. And, as he should. He's 10-year veteran in the NHL. And, he does anything that's asked of him. He plays wing. He plays center when needed. He finishes his checks. he goes out there and is the first guy in on the forecheck. He's the first guy in on the back check. This season, he also set career highs with 18 goals, 25 assists, and 43 points this year. So almost a 20-goal scorer. He was asked to do a lot more than previous years, obviously, because the depth just wasn't there. He signed for 3 more years at a very affordable $3 million a year. He's still only 28 years old, so he is that veteran, but I think he's on that bubble.
And still younger. Yeah.
He's still young enough to keep here, and he signed for that time. He has shown he's never wanted to leave Philadelphia, so hopefully he can take us through kind of this next rough patch of years as we continue on in this rebuild.
That's a good way to put that.
Yeah, and like you said, Tyson Forrester as well. Tyson Forrester came up. He's a 2020 first-round pick. He's 21 years old. He scored 20 goals, 26 assists, and 46 points with the Phantoms this year. He looked great for them. Really took off this year. Last year, I was hoping he would do it. He really didn't. But he managed to do so this year. Wow. And he had a short stint with the Flyers, and he showed he could do it. I think he put 7 points up in 8 games. Yeah. So something to be excited about. I like that the Flyers brought up the youth once Danny Briere took over, once Chuck Fletcher flew the coop, and really brought up some of the youth. Even though they were fighting for a playoff spot, the Phantoms were, and at times cycled through some of the younger guys up in the Flyers and allowed them to get at least a taste of what it's going to be like next season when they potentially could join the club, for the long haul. So those are my key points. There's a lot more, bits and pieces. Those are the guys that were really made this at times somewhat bearable to watch this season. Let's just say that.
Let me say this though. As far as what both of you guys have touched on, you guys have both touched on some great players, some great things that are good for the Flyers. Is obviously the change in management, the change in even the CEO, the change there. I'm looking forward to that as well. One of the key players that I believe Isaiah even mentioned, Noah Cates, is one that I believed was a really good bright spot. I also felt that Cam York showed that he is capable of being an NHL defenseman, and I would like to see more of him in more situations, just because I would like to see that a little bit more. I too was also very impressed with the draft picks, the Ronnie Adders, the Tyson Forsters, and the young guys that were making a splash, even in Lehigh. We have been known here on Hockey Writers Ink as not a fan of the lower league team not coaching the same system as the big club. But, it really showed that Tyson Forrester and Ronnie Attard and some of these young guys were really the real deal, and can't wait to see these guys next year. And that's kind of what I'm looking forward to as far as that's concerned for next year. You know what I mean? That to me was the good. So now
I got one more positive. Positive. I like the fact that Tortorella and Danny Briere seem to be on the same page. They are talking. They're discussing things. They look like they're trying to make that plan. That Isaiah was talking about earlier. At least coming together and trying to formulate a plan moving forward. I don't really like how Tortorella has been off the bench so much. I liked how he was sitting up with Danny for at least a game or two, but
I don't need to be hearing from Rocky Thompson.
I don't.
All right,
power play is not doing that great, Rocky. Yeah,
Isaiah, here we go now.
If I could interject something.
Yeah, please.
I'm less concerned about giving Rocky Thompson or Darrell Williams a look, or Brad Shaw, as I am like Tortorella wants to have his cake and eat it too. Yeah. He wants to have a say in personnel, and he wants to coach the team, and he wants to do it in the same wavelength as Chuck Fletcher and him never were with Danny Briere. But the whole thing is just kind of screwy, because in my mind, and you guys can tell me and I don't want to veer off from what you're trying to do here, but I think it's all part and parcel of the same
No,
thing.
because that's why we wanted you on here, because we want your opinion.
Wouldn't you hire a president of hockey operations first? Let him bring in his guy, articulate the vision, and this guy would have a lot of experience. And then he would have a general manager who deals with the day in, day out nuts and bolts of being a general manager. And the president of hockey ops would also serve as liaison between corporate and the hockey ops side to avoid some of the things that went on in the lack of communication. So let's just say, I'll pull a name out of a hat. Everybody's been talking about Ray Shiro or whoever. Okay, maybe that's a good name, maybe that's a bad name. I'm not going to provide an opinion at right now. I may have one later, but
we have a name.
Yeah. And what if Ray Shiro doesn't think Danny Briere is actually the best candidate to be a general manager,
or even Tortorella the best coach?
Right. Herein lies the problem. The organization once again has developed its idea of what their favorite son is, as I call Danny Briere. It's definitely, It sounds like someone who's a favorite of Val Camillo. Val Camillo has no pedigree in hockey at all. Okay?
Right.
And Dan Hilferty is a very successful executive, and I get that. They know what is a winning formula in business, but not necessarily in hockey. So again, things are out of sequence. They're out of phase. And I think good personnel can overcome that. But after 10 years of ineptitude in the worst era in Flyers history, why are we still doing some of these dysfunctional things?
Yes, I agree. I totally agree.
I don't know. I think you put the ugly first.
I think you bring,
supposed to put the bad before the ugly. On this one, Isaiah. I think you put the ugly first.
I think it's very true in that statement. I think they've been grooming Danny Briere, especially Valerie, since he's retired, and suggesting that he go to.
Who is they? That you're saying
exactly.
Valerie.
Who is they?
And it sounds
who
like
is
it's
they?
Valerie and Dan Hilferty, probably had his arm twisted because he's new. He hasn't,
Well, that too, yeah. But Valerie, particular, from what I hear and what I've been around and heard things up in the press box, was the one grooming Danny Briere for this job, suggesting that he go back to college to get certain degrees to Wharton and everything else and gave him the opportunity, managing their Comcast owned ECHL team and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
The Maine Mariners, and grooming him for this. So I don't disagree with you. I think you start with a person at that level above the thin blue line or whatever there between management and everything else, and then somewhere in between.
So let me throw this at. Let me throw this at both of you guys.
Let me throw this at both of you guys. We got to get that guy.
Okay, let me throw this at both of you guys. So they had to have known that they were going to have Dave Scott step down, because they hired Hilferty like way back in like December or something, right? And they made the announcement at some point in some time like that, right? So they already knew all this stuff was going to fly, right? And then they bring in Danny Briere as kind of the stopgap, right? Because they need to have a general manager at this point in time of the year, I guess. I don't know. I mean, this is kind of what I'm looking at. Like, why are you guys doing it like this? There has to be a reason why you're doing it like this. It's so backwards that it doesn't make any fracking sense. But so what is the reason? Why are they doing it like this? So do they have to bring Danny Briere in to make it look good, to try to save a little face because they just canned Chuck Fletcher, right? So now you bring Danny Briere, and now he's the quote-unquote interim. Would you guys like to see him either stay as the general manager or the assistant general manager, or would you like to see him be president of hockey ops? Where would you like to see Danny in this, Lance?
Definitely not president of hockey ops. I don't think he's reached that level of, experience yet on this side of, the ice. He is that player on the ice. He was that player on the ice, but now, he's just getting his feet wet into management, let alone, a president of hockey ops. I'd much rather have a guy like Ray, that Isaiah mentioned, to come in and has that experience doing just about everything there is to do on the management side, and above that in the hockey operation side.
Yeah.
So and he has that Flyers link to him anyway that everybody in Flyersville love to see. I don't know why, but anyway, if somebody like that came in, I would rather see them on that hockey ops side, and then bring a more experienced GM in that kind of knows what he's doing, that has no freaking ties to Philadelphia at all. They tried that experiment with Chuck Fletcher, but Chuck Fletcher's too old school for me. I think he's still trying to be that GM that Bobby Clark and all those guys were. I want to see. I would like to see a guy like the Carolina Hurricanes assistant GM who used to be a beat writer for the who used to be a beat writer for the Flyers, come over, and Eric Toslowski, and be the GM, because he is a statistical genius and he's able to use those stats that even he came up with to start viewing certain players, to fill certain spots on the roster and all that. And that's who I would like to see, somebody with experience in building a winning franchise. I don't know.
Now, Isaiah, what do you think about this whole Danny Briere thing? Where would you like to see this whole shakedown? You just heard our name. We just gave up our name as who we felt would be the best general manager that we would like to see. I'm not a fan of Danny Briere being a general manager. I am not a fan of him being hockey ops. If he wants to be the assistant general manager, okay. But where do you stand on this, Isaiah?
I just had to comment when you said you were kind of hesitating how to describe Fletcher. I thought of Strother Martin.
That's a good way.
Whatchamacallit, from Cool Hand Luke.
Yeah,
there you go. There you go.
What we have here is failure, and then just stop it right there.
To communicate.
Yeah, that too.
Right.
That's the biggest problem. Yeah.
Let me check my app. Let me check my app to see if this is a good trade. That is crazy how they said that, and how he admitted that his people came up with an app for him so he could see that a trade was a good move for him or a bad move for him.
I want to see
NHL general manager needs that.
Works as well as his app, right?
Yeah, there you go. That's his app. EA Sports. Yeah.
So, but I want to hear where you stand on this whole Danny Briere thing, because you obviously have the same kind of thoughts and feelings that we do about the fact that they're kind of putting the cart before the horse here.
Yeah, well, okay. They were going to, this is how capricious and how poorly run they have been. And we can only hope for the end. And Briere, whatever. Look, Briere is going to be here. We can't, whether we like it or not.
Right.
He's going to be here. I would disagree. There's two scenarios. They were going to replace Chuck in December. Then, like I said, owing to their capricious nature, they went on a little bit of a winning streak, and whatever plan they had, they dumped that. So it wasn't a plan if you're going to dump it that fast. It was just a notion. Hey,
maybe.
Just forget it. Anyway. So anyway, Mr. Flyers. This is why 10 years in a dumper, and you wonder why a dumpster fire is where we all live in. Oh, it's hot in here. Anyway,
but everything's fine. Everything's fine.
That's fine.
5 points away from the playoff spot.
Yeah, five games, 5 points. That's it. they were going to replace him, and then that went out the dumper, and Hilferty came in, and obviously there was going to be a succession plan where Dave Scott was shown the door, and Val Camillo drove. Obviously, seems like she's driving the bus for Danny to be the golden child. So they offered him, according to Anthony DeMarco at the fourth period, who's been a pretty good source recently, that's for sure. At least recently, if not further back. He said they offered Danny either position, and he wanted to build the team, and the best way for him to do it, the best job for him, would be general manager. But his actual experience, and I'm going to disagree a little bit with Lance, is actually more on the hockey ops side. Because number one, the hockey ops people are going to interface more with people like Val Camillo.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number
and
two,
the Comcast people.
Right. He ran a team from an administrative position, at least in Maine.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, was one of the old haunts, the AHL franchises way back in the 70s when Ken Linsman was coming up. I saw the Maine Mariners come into town in Philadelphia Convention Center. But anyway, I digress. But so he has a little bit of experience in that, and he's got the graduate degree. So if I were going to go anywhere, knowing that Danny has to be here, I'd rather he do that. Where
hockey ops,
the hockey ops, it actually can do less damage if you're worried about him.
Yeah.
Because this is where true. I'm more concerned that he's going to think he understands player value and this, Chuck Fletcher's talking about using an app and all this. Okay, I have no problem. That's something you keep in house. For him to say it shows how insecure Chuck Fletcher was at the very end. Like he was afraid to say the word rebuild. You could pick at Chuck Fletcher all day long, and he is a milquetoast. He puts 2 milks and 2 pieces of toast in there. And, he was really a clown. But anyway, so I think now the question now becomes, okay, so now you've locked Danny in for some reason because, Val Camillo, I don't know, maybe they're going to have they're going to end up like, Sean Hannity and Ainsley Earhart or something, going to have this secret affair, and who knows, they're going to get married in a couple of years. But I don't understand what kind of president of hockey ops is going to want to step in to, get in between Comcast and Danny Briere and John Tortorella. Who would want to insert themselves in that unless he himself is another kind of milquetoasty, kind of liaison, go along, get along, wishy-washy guy?
A yes man.
Yeah, a yes man. Yeah, you're right. Danny, I think, could kiss, upper management and, all Valerie's butt and appease them at that level. But I guess I was hoping for more of a person that could talk sense into the upper echelon and allow the GM just to do, like you said, be the GM and do that and not have to answer to the higher powers, the Bob Clarks and the Paul Holmgrens and all that are still floating around for some reason, even though they haven't been on the ice for 40 years.
Yeah, but Danny's very strong-willed. And there's some stories that he actually kind of used some PR techniques to kind of pump up his value just when he was supposedly interviewing for the PR job. I mean, the GM job, or it might have been a PR job in Montreal. So that he might not have actually been that serious a candidate, but he talked himself out, or he had people talk himself up, so he would gain more value in the eyes of the Flyers who clung to him and made him the advisor. So maybe he's really good at machinations, and that can be, almost a good thing in some ways. But still, like I'm clinging to what you're saying. The only advantage to him as hockey ops is like, not only in addition to him not getting in on the ground floor as a GM and using his ego to make mistakes, and we don't have time for that. If you bring in a senior guy's GM, he would probably have more upward ability to affect Briere with a track record of success than somebody like Val Camillo who has no hockey success. So he'd be more malleable because he has a track record. And if the Flyers win on the ice and they're improving, I think that would have a better effect, and that would be a better situation. That said, I agree with your overall premise that it should be 2 different people. Bring in your hockey ops guy and let him pick his people. And
so you don't even care.
Even Tortorella.
You don't even care who it is. You just want them to be two different people, and you would much rather Danny Briere, if we have to keep Danny Briere, you'd much rather have him be the hockey ops and then bring in a general manager or.
He has more experience as a suit. So
Yeah,
let
I'm
him
with
deal
you.
with the suits.
Yeah, I'm with you.
When you got to deal with the day in, day out business of managing the cap and manipulating the roster, if I can get it out, and making, trades and interfacing with amateur and pro scouts and making those decisions. It's a real tough job. I want someone who's experienced. I don't want someone who's a newbie relying on some president of hockey ops who I think is going to have to be a malleable person, or you're going to have you're going to have infighting. And we just went through that for the last couple of years.
Right. And another thing, why is Brent Flair still sticking around? You got rid of Chuck Fletcher. He was brought in with Chuck Fletcher because he was his guy in Minnesota. And yeah, but that's part of the problem. Like, you have unsuccessful drafts and everything like that.
Okay, but from Cam York on, which is when he's responsible, things have looked better. You got York, Forster, Tuamala. Okay, they swung big on a second-round pick.
Yeah,
because they were stupid enough to trade the
Ristolainen.
That was really dumb. But okay, but so far, and people like Cutter Gauthier, I would have taken a year to check myself. That's my personal preference. So what they're saying is his draft development record is encouraging enough that Danny, are we going to make the conversion? I asked Eklund this. Are we going to start having to call him Daniel? Like, Bob, from Bobby to Bob Clark? I wonder if that conversion is going to happen anytime soon.
Always going to be Danny B as far as I'm concerned. He's always going to be Danny B. I don't care how old he gets. The same thing with it's always going to be Clarky. That's just how it's always going to be to me. You know what I mean? It was kind of funny. I saw a tweet the other day where somebody posted their old Bob Clark street hockey stick, right? And I had to go dig into my closet. I'm like, I still got mine. It's sitting right over there in the corner, buddy. It's still sitting there. So yeah, look, there's a lot of moving parts here with this team, and not a lot of stuff is nailed down. And there's so much stuff up in the air that I don't even think the Flyers know what they're doing yet. Look, we've talked about the good. We've talked about the bad. Now let's get into some ugly. Okay? And not like we weren't talking about ugly stuff before, but everybody talks about how, the Flyers need to do this and the Flyers need to do that because they need cap space and they need cap space and blah, blah, blah. And then the reality is that they're not going to be able to move any of these contracts because they have no trade clauses, or they're injured, or whatever the case is. So now you have to start looking at guys like coming up from the NCAA or coming up from, those types of ranks to try to bolster your roster, because you can't. You have no cap space. You have no cap space. You have virtually no draft picks, right? That are going to be worthy of anything. I mean, I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at. There's too many moving parts here, and I'm not liking how things are shaken down with Danny Briere being the interim GM, and then there's no hockey ops guy and things like that. So now, Lance, your inspiration for the ugly.
Yeah. Well, the Flyers are the 6th worst team in the league. Like Isaiah said, they were too bad to fight for a wild card spot, but they were too good for any real shot at drafting a, Connor Bednar. So
if we had 61 points, we would be in the lottery.
Right. They can't even, they screw up tanking. They can't even tank right. If you're going to stink all the way, and let's go get a top 3 pick. Somebody that's going to change the face of this franchise, be that star, like Isaiah said, that we don't currently have on the Flyers roster. The Flyers put themselves in this position, though, because they finished the season 29th in scoring, 10th in goals allowed. Their goaltenders combined for an average of 3.36 goals per game. They stopped less than 90% of their shots faced. And to add insult to injury, with all this beefing up the power play, again trying to do that, they finished dead last in the power play yet again, with only capitalizing on 15.2% of their chances this year. So, like Steele said in my article as well, they have no cap space. They're weighted down by huge contracts that Chuck Fletcher either brought in or inked himself. And above all that, this year they spent roughly $20 million on 3 different players that did not play a single game for the Flyers. Ryan Ellis, who's been on IR and who we all know is pretty much done medically, not allowed to play hockey ever again. We're stuck paying him $6.25 million for the next 4 years to sit in the rafters and watch games. Sean Couturier, right? Sean Couturier right. Sean Couturier is the highest paid, was made the highest paid Flyer by Fletcher when he been arguably injured the past 3 seasons, for the better part of 3 seasons. And, Cam Atkinson's had to have a serious neck surgery, and the Flyers paid him close to $6 million this year to not play a single game. So, there goes back to that article that I wrote before on questioning the Flyers' choices in medical personnel. I think they've had the same injuries or the inability to get healthy from certain injuries, and a reoccurrence of the same injuries to certain players repeatedly. So despite all of that, and management knowing that they are going into this offseason with little to no cap space to sign the restricted free agents we have on our roster that we want to bring back, guys like Cam York and others, and having no other major cap space to go out and sign anybody who could potentially be a star for this franchise moving forward. They did not listen to me at all, and did not go out and even try to sign any formidable NCAA talent that went undrafted, like I wrote in some articles before, and like I write a lot about prospects. Instead, they let the teams that are contenders go out and do that. They had Colorado Avalanche sign Jason Paulin, who tied Adam Fantilli, the Hobie Baker Award winner, in goals, top, the NCAA this year with 30 goals. Nashville Predators continue to get better on defense, as they always beef up their defense, and they got Jake Livingstone from Minnesota State. The Hurricanes went out and signed arguably my favorite goaltender, who is not currently in the NHL, in Yaniv Peretz.
Not anymore, buddy.
Right, from Quinnipiac, the national champion. And
signed with the Hurricanes the other day.
Right, signed with the Hurricanes. And the Florida Panthers went out and signed a guy who we interviewed on Prospect Watch this year, in Ryan McAllister, who arguably was one of the best players, a freshman, in all of the NCAA this year, and was leading the NCAA in points for most of the year. All of these guys wouldn't have cost the Flyers any draft picks to obtain. They wouldn't have cost them any roster players to obtain. All they would have cost them was a simple entry-level contract, and they did not do that.
Yeah.
Let me just interject here. How many of those guys actually really make an impact? When you get these kids, these college kids, I'm not talking about guys that were drafted. I'm talking about players that were never drafted, come out of school. I'm not talking about like Adam Fox or something like that, or even a guy like Jay O'Brien. We can maybe discuss him. But all I'm saying is it's pretty rare for players like that to make a really big impact. And I think the Flyers right now have a lot of guys that can contribute potentially at the level of the players you're talking to. In fact, they have a surfeit of them. What they really need are the high level guys, and they don't want to clog up their contract numbers with guys that only might end up being AHL depth.
So I'm with you on that to an extent, but okay, you've got a lot of UFAs and a lot of RFAs this year. Okay. And that's kind of where I'm at with this, because you don't have, and this is kind of why I see where Lance is coming from, but I also see where you're coming from too, Isaiah. But just riddle me this. You have very little cap space, right? You have very little draft capital. So you're not going to be able to get anybody that's going to, and you're still playing the Justin Bronze instead of the Ronnie Addards. You're still
we're talking about for next year now.
That's what I'm talking about, right? So that's kind of where I'm trying to bring this to, is that I would like to see them at least entertain the idea of bringing in some of these players that, yeah, they might not be the high level impact player that they need, but they could be one of those players that isn't going to cost them anything to get, that, hey, if they make the roster, bonus. If not, hey, well, you didn't lose anything. You see what I'm trying to say? It's a cheap way to try to find somebody that could make your club without having to go and spend any money that you don't have.
But again, I think they are loaded in the NHL and the AHL with guys who are at like a bottom 6 level or a bottom 3 defenseman. Think about what they're
and they need to clean that out. They need to clean out some of those guys.
But those guys,
and they haven't. They keep bringing this
for 4, 5, 6 years. How soon are they going to be playing?
Well, wait a minute.
Right, and those guys are stuck there, and they keep signing them back.
Yeah, but none of those guys are really making any money that you can't clear out. I mean, one of the guys that you really like, who I would be open to trading, because you could probably get more than he's worth right now, would be a guy like Scott Lawton, because he's only making $3 million. He is that Swiss Army knife, and somebody might want to give you a first-round draft pick. And guess what you need more than Scott Lawton right now?
I don't think you're going to get first for him.
Right? So I just provided a rationale, and even though I don't like Jay O'Brien, even though Joe O'Brien was just called a right-handed Scott Lawton by another one of the coaches in the NCAA, okay, that would be a rationale for signing a guy like Jay O'Brien, who you drafted, way overdrafted, probably a third-round level talent. Second-round level talent at best. Okay, this is where they have to be thinking. They have to. You say they don't have cap space. Guess what? Neither did Ron Hextall when he came in, and that's the one thing Ron Hextall did well. Right? He did a really good job of that. This is what Danny Briera's main job is. He's got to probably going to buy out Tony DeAngelo, right? He's got to probably eat enough money to move out Kevin Hayes. He's probably going to end up eating about $2.5 million. This is the crux of what he needs to do. I can't worry about college free agents that aren't going to be any better than probably Jackson Cates. I can't. There's just nothing there. You have Zamula, you have Emil Andre, you have a couple of guys that are, Wiley? Wiley's probably, I don't even think he's an NHL player, but he's probably as good as anybody who's going to come off the shelf that hasn't been drafted and hasn't shown enough to be signed in the NCAA level. So I think the main focus has to be taking swings at high-end talent and clearing cap space. Now, where I think they need to go get guys, and they're going to have to play the free agency game, but only at a mid-tier for Band-Aids. And the guys you're talking about, again, I'm not trying to attack I see where you're coming from. They need, if they're going to trade Provorov, they're going to need somebody who can take those minutes, who has experience, who's not going to cost you a lot. Because remember, we're in a rebuild. We're not trying to win next year. We're trying to win the cup in 5 or 6 years.
Right.
So how do you get there? And once you've articulated that as your goal, and this is what Hilferty did when he came out, which is to his credit, stop talking about, we'll make the playoffs. The Flyers of old, back in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s when Lindros got here, what do we need to do to become a cup contender, create a window where we really do have a chance to win the cup? And I think that's what they're trying to get back to. So next year, I'm not worried about it.
I'm with you.
No, exactly. I agree.
But we agree. I think we all agree. But I think there has to be a combination of, you're gonna, and that's why I'm very nervous about Danny B as being the general manager, because not only are they going to have to do that, Isaiah, but they're going to have to look at guys like some of these college guys that they could bring in that could help the team. I'm not sitting here saying that has to be your main focus. All I'm saying is that is another avenue that you could use to get this team to a certain level so that you could at least be able to try to get to a certain place. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I know.
Here's the problem.
Charlie O'Connor said when, and I agree with him. He said early in the 2000s or the 2010s, the Flyers had some high end level talent. They just didn't have anything behind it. Now they're in the exact opposite. They have this surplus of players that can play, like F7 on down, probably to F15. Right. And they have defensemen that are really like, D4, 5, 6, 7, all the way down to about 11 or 12. But they don't have a number one defenseman and they don't have a number one center.
Sure.
Right. They could just find.
You're going to have to draft them.
You're going
to have to draft them. You're going to have to draft.
You have to have enough draft capital.
You're going to have to get rid of them.
No. See, I see where you're going, Isaiah. I see where you're going. You have to package up somebody and some draft capital to get that person. But, and this is kind of where this is why I'm saying that this general manager has to be able to do all of these kinds of things, because yes, we need the high end talent, but the only way you can get the high end talent is by doing a certain set of things. And clearing out some of the ugly contracts are not going to be as easy because there's the no trade clauses and things of that nature. Yeah, we would like to see those contracts go, but in reality, are they really going to be able to do anything with Hayes? Are they really going to be able to do anything with Provorov? Are they really going to be able to do anything with Carter Hart? I want to see it. Until this point, I haven't seen spit.
Well, no one's tried.
Well, I think we're all right here.
Fletcher. Yeah, I mean, Fletcher might have tried to trade Hayes, but Fletcher was clearly incompetent. But yeah, I mean, Fletcher, it's pretty clear that Kevin Hayes is not comfortable here under the Tortorella regime.
Nope.
And it's also pretty clear, based on everything I've heard from several sources, that if you turn him into a $4.5 to $5 million center, then he can be moved. And the Flyers have to be willing to eat that to make up for the mistakes. Provorov is on a list of a lot of teams, including Los Angeles, obviously, most prominently. The Flyers were asking for Byfield, and I don't blame them. And I would go back and say, hey, listen, you know what? Why don't we take a look at, we're going to add Frost, and Frost is a much better player than with Provorov. And I would, again, try to get Byfield, even though it was someone I really respect. Things Byfield is probably only going to be a high-end C, a 2C. I'll take my chances.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. No, I'm with you on that.
But I'm just, so I definitely think Provorov is movable for a first-round draft pick. He's controllable. He's got 2 years left. He doesn't want to be here. And I'm not worried about another thing I heard about Provorov. They might hang on to him because they don't have anybody to replace his minutes. Well, this is where you were talking about going out and getting a Band-Aid mid-tier free agent. You're in a rebuild. You have to trade and get the biggest value so you can get a swing at high-end talent. That is everything. Look what happened with Tippett. They wanted what's his name? They wanted Denisenko from Florida, and they couldn't get him. And guess what? They made out pretty well.
All hinges on a big giant if they can move some of these big ugly contracts.
And guys, I think.
Yeah.
Let me say, I think we're all right to a certain extent. Yes. First things first. Whoever the GM's going to be needs to get rid of as many bad contracts, the Provorovs, the Kevin Hayes, whoever they can.
Sanheim.
Provorov is not a bad contract.
No, I agree, but I think Ristolainen's a bad contract.
But he's not a number one player. He's not a number one defenseman.
Nobody's
So-
Right.
making 6.65 or something like
But
that.
but
right?
I think that's a bad contract, and I think Sanheim is a bad contract.
Oh, well, everybody knows
I
that
do too.
one. You want to talk about something buried in quicksand.
Right. So
Okay, but see, these are the kinds of contracts that need to be moved in order for the Flyers to do
you
anything.
can't move them all in 1 year.
That's what I
Okay.
mean.
exactly my point. Exactly my point. They're not going to be able to move everybody this year like they
Right.
want to. It's going to be a long process. Like they're saying, it's not going to be a 1-year rebuild. It's going to be over the next 2 or 3 years that you're going to be able to hopefully pull off some of these deals.
Yeah.
So in the interim, you're talking about finding star prospect or star players. You're not going to do that in free agency right now because no star free agent is going to want to come to Philadelphia. We don't have the money. We don't have the team that they're going to want to come to play with right now. You got to get those star players through the draft. And like you're saying, you're trying to get rid of as much as you can to gain draft capital. Yes, that's what you need to do. But even those players that you draft, unless they're top 5 talent, are going to take a year or two to develop. So yes, create space. Don't spend crazy money. Try to create as much cap space as you can, like Hextall did previously.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get mid-level guys at best from free agency. You're going to need to draft the correct players that are going to be those high-end talent players. But
Yeah.
at the same token, I do think I don't want to cite all of these, NCAA players, but they should have went after at least one. And you can't tell me that, guys don't come from the NCAA. Yes, you're saying, guys they get drafted. Adam Fantilli just got beat by Yaniv Peretz, and he got stopped by Yaniv Peretz and Quinnipiac, and he did so all his NCAA career. I mean, he led the past 2 seasons in the NCAA in GAA, goals against average. He had a 1.17 GAA. The previous year, he had a 1.49 GAA this year. He had 10 shutouts this year. He had 10 shutouts last year. We had him in development camp this past season when we knew that we lost Ivan Fedotov and he wasn't coming over. He would have been a guy we should have signed.
How do you feel about the Flyers' goaltending position right now? You have Carter Hart.
It's horrible.
NHL.
Carter Hart's,
But he's an NHL goalie.
but he's a bottom. He's not a starter. He's not a legitimate guy that you want to be.
Lance, we're in a rebuild. Okay, hold on.
Right, exactly.
Right
Trade
now,
him.
We're in a Carter. We can get to that. But right now they have Carter Hart. They have Ursan, who I think is an NHL talent. Askarov, not Askarov? Who is the Russian kid? He's Kolosov.
Kolosov.
Kolosov is probably the number one prospect.
He's not.
Well,
No.
I've heard differently. Okay. They like what they have right now in goal, and they still have Sandstrom, who I think is a bankable backup. So where are you gonna? They can draft these guys.
Sandstrom's horrible. He's not even AHL level in my mind. What's his record this year?
Is a backup player. I'm just saying they don't have a pressing need where they have to go out and get a goaltender in it, or they're showing they're not dedicated to not. You have to address needs when you're going after free agents or making trades.
I think goaltending's the need.
Player. Goaltending, well, maybe it is, but I have a feeling that that's a discussion they're going to have. I mean, when you have Elliot Friedman and Jeff Marek out there saying Carter Hart is going to be available, we can talk about the merits of Carter Hart. Be careful when you evaluate him. You got to read the crosstabs. And what is his high danger percentage and all that? I think right now he is someone who was good in 19, good in 20. The league figured him out. They adapted. He didn't adapt. Now he's coming back a little bit better. And like Steve Valiquette from Clearsight Analytics, ex-NHL goalie, backup goalie for years of Henrik Lundqvist, was talking about. He is a guy who didn't get the proper development. He should have got like 200 games at the AHL level. The Flyers screwed up his development. Shocker. Yeah, real shocker.
Hextall told him not to rush him. Yes.
That's right. And they did. Excuse me. And what happens often is a situation where you have someone like that who's like Markstrom, like in Florida. Had to go get exposed to somebody like Ian Clark at Vancouver to become a premier goalie. And he had a great season in Calgary, and of course he struggled since.
One of the
but
best
bottom line,
goaltending
Markstrom was
coaches
a really good goalie
in the NHL. Yes.
Carter Hart might not make it here, and we do have to be open to trading him. Okay.
Yes. But I agree with you.
I'm just glad to hear.
I don't think he's horrible in any means. Horrible in any means. I think the Flyers rushed him. I think he's broken mentally. He tried to fight back this season, and he again is on a horrible team. I don't think that this young kid, he's still young, but I don't think trying to he's up after next season. Are you going to pay him because you simply have nothing better? I don't think he's an elite level goaltender. I don't even think he's I think he's the worst goaltender in our division, really, because a lot better goaltenders are only a year or so older than him, and they're winning Vezinas right now on a lot better teams, obviously. But I think as far as Philadelphia, he should be done. If they're going to commit to a rebuild, let's commit to a rebuild. If we can get something for him, because I think if you keep him here, I think you're going to ruin him. If you keep him here, the next 2 to 3 years that it's going to take before this team starts to turn around, and these draft picks that they're drafting are going to start making a difference. I think he's going to be broken well before he's 30. And I think that you're going to get back into that Steve Mason kind of thing where he's just been playing on a bad team for too long.
I think there's a lot of merit to that. There's guys that were able to make it through that. I mean, we're Bernie on his first trip here. I mean, the Flyers, it was a totally different era. We get that. But he was not the same guy he was until he went away to Toronto, was exposed to Jacques Plante. Then he comes back. He's a much better goalie than he was when he left here.
Development here stinks. I mean, we've been talking about that for years. Development program stinks here. They don't do it. They rely on the NCAA. They rely on other leagues around the world to develop their players to the point that they're good enough to get to the NHL level, and that's it. Like, then they jump up, because our development program is a bunch of ex-Philadelphia Flyer players that don't know what they're doing, that were immediately given a job with no merit or no premise behind it.
It was. I don't know what it is now.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is now.
We're hoping to get out of that, but let me just say this about
Shel Samuelson's still there, and I mean, what has he done with the?
Do we know that he's bad at his job?
I mean, where have the Flyers prospects been for the past 20 years? He's had that job. What star prospect has come through the system that really wasn't a first round draft pick? Where's those late round draft picks?
Could have drafted his son. We would be better off, right?
I mean, yeah, but you said Sandstrom. I really don't think he's anything. I mean, he's played 24 NHL games. He's won 2 of them. He has a career goals against average over this season. It was 3.72. I don't.
He's a backup, but I do think he's an NHL backup in this league, just like the guy from Jackson, New Jersey, who was out in Anaheim. It's very Stoley, the goalie. I think he's got a very similar career arc.
All right,
yeah, but is that what we're really looking for to fill a roster spot? I'd rather have a guy like Perez and give him a shot. I don't know.
I don't think
there's a lot of holes.
Anybody who could sign that could make a difference. So we're going to disagree there. But
but let me say this. As far as the Carter Hart situation, I don't think Carter Hart's an elite goalie, and
I don't.
You're not going to be able to convince me that he is.
No.
I think he's going to get a better shot with another team, because he needs a change of scenery. That's where I think Carter Hart's at. Okay. Now, with that being said, we need to try to get what we can from him. I believe I'm very impressed with Arison. I would like to see him get a shot more so in the NHL than he is playing with the AHL. Okay, because he has had some bad games in the AHL as well. Okay, but I would like to see him get a little bit more exposure in the NHL to see where he's at. And I'd like to see what we can get for Carter Hart, because I don't think whatever is going to happen in Philadelphia is going to involve Carter Hart. That train has already left the depot. Because exactly with what you guys both said, he was rushed, he didn't get the development, and he's been broken. And now he's a dysfunctional goalie playing on a really bad team. Okay, look, We've talked about this in the past.
Like we didn't protect the last 20 years of Flyers goaltenders. We don't give them the ability to somebody to play in front of them besides one player, a team in Eric Desjardins and now a Provorov, and we rely too heavily on those type players and don't give them a group of defenders like Carolina does that has 1 through 6 guys that could be a star on any team.
Yeah,
well, that's how you protect the
except for D'Angelo.
That's how you protect.
Except for D'Angelo.
Well, he left. Yeah, well, I mean, he left. So,
Well, okay, yeah, but
no, I was just going to say that their goaltending is the one area that they just don't want to spend any money, and it's going to cost them probably maybe a cup or two.
And I think it has. I think it already has. To be honest with you,
how many years of Cam Ward they had? I mean, just
could you guys
a decent goalie, but
I'll tell you what.
I think
I'm really excited.
Heart.
I'm really excited about Yaniv Peretz being down there in Carolina because I think he's going to have a shot to shine, and I think it's going to be really awesome. And I think everybody's going to see what kind of a good goalie he really is. As far as all of this stuff that's going on here with the Flyers,
yes,
we all have a level of passion for this team that I think is unmatched from just about anybody that I've known that follows this team. And all we want to see is this team win. We want to see this team succeed, right? We don't want to be Debbie Downers all the time. We don't want to constantly be talking about the fact that, look, they're not winning. They got 75 points at best, and they're going to probably be picking 7th in the draft. We want to see what are you guys doing now and tomorrow and for next season and the seasons beyond, right? That's where we're all at. We don't care how it gets there. We don't care who it is or what's going on or how it flies, as long as it flies, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's a sense of order of how this thing needs to be done, and for
me,
that the number one thing they have to do is to commit to doing what it takes to get out of the hole. Which, if they don't get out of it, they'll never be able to do anything. So they have to get back to the starting gate. They're not close right now.
Exactly.
And to do that, it's all about clearing the contracts you can. I expect them to trade 3 major contracts or buy out at least one of them. So I would say 3 contracts have to go, whether it's a buyout. In this case, I would think it could be Tony D'Angelo, unless they can find a flyer for him. And it's going to be Hayes and or Provorov or one other player. And I'm not sure it could be somebody like TK. It could be Carter Hart. And the only reason
they might not all be this year
is because he is what all the attributes that Lance put him under the category of what was good are going to be so attractive to a team that might consider him a dynamic missing piece. They're going to overpay. And knowing that you're going to have to pay Travis at a time when he's going to be 28 or whatever, 29, and you don't want to get there. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with Carter Hart. And you can ask yourself, assuming Carter gets past this obstacle with the Canadian Olympic thing, which I can't imagine he has anything to do with it. It's the longest investigation I've ever seen in my life. But assuming that's not an obstacle, I definitely would be open to moving on from him, because again, does he even want to be here? He's going to be arbitration eligible when he's up for the 24-25 season.
Okay.
And I'm not saying I want to throw him away. I still think he could be like in number 10 to 12, 13 at his high peak. That's his, like a Chris Osgood kind of goalie, right?
Yeah.
No, but nothing.
Yeah, I think he could be successful if he has a defense in front of him. I really do. But he's not going to have that for some time in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
No, see, that's just the thing. We all agree about that one point. You know what I mean? That's what I wanted to point that out, that we all have this passion for and this level of passion for this team. Lance, I think we got a really good one here in the books, man. I think we got a chance to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this team. I think we broke down the team in many ways, and I think we've looked at ways that we can move forward. So I'm going to ask our special guest, why don't you tell the folks out there where we can find you and the O&BPuckcast show and all the other stuff? Why don't you drop all that information here for us, Isaiah?
Oh, great. I appreciate that. I hope I didn't make the show ugly with my.
Oh,
my
no,
counterpoints.
No, that's why we brought you
That's
on. A
why we
difference
brought
of
you on,
opinion,
brother.
yeah?
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You can follow the O&B podcast at O&BPuck, at O&BPuck, on Twitter at O&BPuckcast, at O&BPuckcast on Getter, which is kind of like an alternative platform that we use just in case Twitter gets crazy or something happens. And we also are on 12 or 13 podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeart. Yeah, you name it. We have a YouTube page. Just plug in O&B Podcast in on YouTube. And also, we're on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. And if you could give us a subscribe, follow, whatever is right for your platform, we really do appreciate it. And we'll be back with the show on Monday. We're going to have Russ Cullen on. We're going to talk about a lot of this kind of stuff and take it to a different level.
Can't wait. Can't wait. We look to Isaiah as one of our, he's one of our friends of the show, one of the brothers in the industry. You know what I'm saying? Their podcast is ranked, I believe it's 5th, and ours is like 6th or something like that in the top 10 Flyers podcasts. So you guys got to go check out O&BPuckcast, man. I'm telling you what, they are the standard.
I sent my payment
I saw that. I saw that. Yeah, right. So all right, we're all good. But Lance, why don't you tell the folks where we can get you, where we can find you, and the editor-in-chief of the SteelFlyers All Sports Network?
Sure. Of course, guys, you can catch all my articles on SteelFlyers.com. You can catch all of our shows, the Hockey Writers Ink, as well as the Prospect Watch on YouTube, on any audio platform you can imagine. Like Isaiah said, we're there on every one too.
Yep.
And you can find my stuff on Facebook and all different Flyers groups. And you can find me on Twitter at LanceGreen39.
Awesome sauce, man. This has been a great show here for the Hockey Writers Ink, episode number 119. We got to have Isaiah from O&BPuck. Awesome having you on the show, man. We really appreciate you spending some time here with us. I am SteelFlyers. You can find me on Twitter at SteelFlyers52. You can find all the great stuff at SteelFlyers.com. All the great shows from Prospect Watch to Hockey Writers Ink, the SteelFlyers podcast, the Pearl of Wisdom, and the great Peyton on the radio. Check us all out at SteelFlyers.com. Also, appreciate Spreaker and all the help that you guys do in getting us out there to all those platforms. Appreciate that. All you have to do is go to your favorite podcasting platform, type in Hockey Writers Ink, and we will pop up, and you just hit the like and subscribe, give us 5 stars, and it's all good from there. Thank you, Isaiah. Thank you, Lance. Appreciate you guys stopping in and having a chat. We'll catch you all on the next episode of the Hockey Writers Ink.